When I was a little girl, I loved to play house. And when I played house, I would instantly go back in time. I loved Laura Ingalls Wilder and the Little House on the Prairie series. I loved learning about Abraham Lincoln as a little boy. So it was a dream come true to me when last summer, my husband and I were able to stay in a real log cabin. Today, I want to share some things I learned from that visit of how we can use little and still make a beautiful home. I hope you'll join me. Hi, my name is Susanna. I am a wife and mom of 3. I love finding ways to stretch our budget to create a beautiful home while still living on a single income. I hope you will join me and subscribe to my channel as I share ways with you that I have learned to live simply on less. Last summer, I was so excited to get to stay in an authentic log cabin down near Lexington, Virginia. It was as beautiful as I thought it would be. I loved every minute of our stay, and it was so peaceful. While I was there, I would sit and just look around at my surroundings and think, how could I bring some of these feelings of peace and beauty home with me? I know we often do this when we go on vacation. As I stayed there, I tried to think, what were the things that made this place so beautiful and welcoming? Here are some things I learned. The first thing was everything in this log cabin had a purpose. This little log cabin only had one main room downstairs, and upstairs there was a bedroom and a bathroom attached. So it really was a tiny place. It kind of blows my mind when I think that families would raise children in homes this small. Now I realize they didn't have all the modern conveniences that we did back then, things like laundry rooms with washing machines, dryers, even their kitchens were much simpler, but still they were able to live comfortable lives in such tiny environments. There was nothing in this cabin that didn't have a purpose. This kitchen had everything you needed. It had the sink, it had a small oven, it had a refrigerator, it had pans, it had dishes, it had silverware. Everything you needed, but there was nothing extra. What amazed me is even the cupboards were not packed full. They were able to take exactly what was needed and reduce it to just what was necessary. The living room was the same way. There was a simple love seat, there was a rocking chair with a footstool, and there was a table against the wall that had fold-down sides. There was a TV hanging on the wall that was covered by a map, and there was a welcoming rug in the middle of the floor and a beautiful little fireplace. But there was nothing extra, only what was needed. Upstairs was the same way. There was a queen-size bed. There were 2 dressers, and there was a place to hang clothing, but nothing extra. Everything in this cabin had a purpose, including the decorations. There was a beautiful set of stairs that went upstairs to the bedrooms. And on the stairs, I was intrigued to see that even the little decorations that were on the stairs were things that were useful. There was a little straw broom that was on the stairs. It was a piece of art. It looked decorative, but it also had a use. The second thing I learned was that useful can still be beautiful. Because this cabin was so small, there wasn't a lot of room for extra decorations. So they took the things that were needed, and instead of just buying practical things, they bought things that were beautiful while still having a good use. For example, up in the bathroom, the towel racks were hand-wrought by a blacksmith, and they were not only useful, but they were beautiful and a decoration for the bathroom. Downstairs in the kitchen, because there wasn't a lot of room, they would hang the pans and some of the utensils on the wall, but they used a metal rod, and so even the pans hanging there on the wall were beautiful. Instead of using old chip pans, they found ones that were beautiful. We could do this in our own homes as well. We can find things that are beautiful. I love, even when my mixing bowls are beautiful, I like to go to yard sales, thrift stores, antique stores, and find beautiful bowls that I love. And so even though they are beautiful, they still are useful. And I like to use them. Instead of just putting my things away to save for good occasions, I like to get them out and use them on an everyday basis. Even in my pantry, I like to find things that are useful and beautiful. I have some metal buckets that I think are really pretty, but I store things like my rice and my noodles, things like that in them. So when I open my pantry, it's not only serving a purpose, but it also looks beautiful to my eyes. We can do this with use of baskets. Even my laundry baskets, I like to either use real baskets or I use galvanized tubs. And so even when I'm doing things just like laundry, dirty laundry, when I look at it, it brings me happiness. I've even switched out some of my garbage cans in my house. Instead of using a plastic garbage can, I have old metal maple syrup buckets, and I use those for garbage cans. So that way, again, it not only is serving a purpose, but it's still beautiful. Because this house was so small, there wasn't room for things that the people who owned it didn't care about. It was filled only with the things they truly loved. Now, I realize this was just a rental place and not a real home, but this is something I brought home with me when we returned. As I came home, I immediately began going through just my bookshelves as I realized my books were filled to overflowing, and there were so many books on them that I really didn't even care about. As I was at this little cottage, I thought everything here is special to the people who designed it. And I wondered if someone came into my house, would they know what I truly cared about, what things I truly loved by what I had? And so I began on my bookshelves, and I began taking off books that I either had read and didn't love, books that I had that maybe I would read someday, but realistically I probably wouldn't. And I especially wanted to create some room, some space. Often we fill our lives so full and we fill our homes so full that there isn't any space for people to actually see what we care about the most. This is true even in our closets. Often our closets are packed to overflowing, so when we look through them, we're just overwhelmed with all the choices. What I've tried to do is limit the clothes in my closet to what I truly love, to what my favorites are. And I learned this all while at this little log cabin. The next lesson I learned from the cabin was to use vertical space. Again, because the cabin was so small, they had to make the best use of the space available. So they would use the walls. Instead of having lamps on the tables beside couches or beside the bed, they would hang them on the walls. In the kitchen, I mentioned this before, but instead of having pans take up space in the cupboard, they simply had a rod where they would hang the pans from the rod above the stove. It was wonderful use of vertical space. Often we just think about what we can put on surfaces, and while it sometimes takes a little more effort, if we can find ways to get things off the floor and up on the walls, it's a wonderful way to use our space wisely in our homes. Another thing the little log cabin had was furniture that had storage in it. The bed especially, even though it was a queen-size bed in this tiny room, the bed had drawers underneath it, so they were able to keep the linens for the bed and the linens for the bathroom in the bed itself, and you really didn't even notice it. They also used the hutch very wisely. The top had glass doors, so behind those doors they kept things that were pretty to look at, things like the books, decorations, but below there were doors that weren't glass, and so inside of the bottom was where they kept practical things. This is a great way for us to do in our own homes. I know lately the trend in kitchens has been open shelving, and I love the look of open shelving, but really it's so much easier to keep a kitchen clean when we think of storage in our kitchens, and truthfully, a cabinet with closed doors is a lot easier. Now you can still have some open shelves for decoration, but also think, where are you going to put the things that you don't want everybody to see? We can do this with our beds by either using underbed boxes or by having beds that come with drawers included underneath them. This is also true even of our TV stands, things like that. Rather than having an open stand, often if we have something with drawers, we can put so much more in them and keep it looking nice in the rest of our rooms. When you have less, what you do have can be more expensive. This was so true of this little cabin. They had the minimal amount of furniture, the minimal amount of decorations, but everything they had was beautiful. And I believe some of it probably costs more than what our average things are. For example, I mentioned the towel racks in the bathroom. I'm sure they cost a little more than the cheap ones at Walmart, but they were a thing of art. And because they didn't have so much to buy for, they were able to really invest in the pieces that they had. This is true with our pans. We can have 5 cheap, inexpensive pans, or we could really invest in maybe 2 quality, beautiful pans. We can do this even with the furniture in our rooms. When our rooms aren't filled to overflowing, we can invest in a few good pieces that are really beautiful, that we truly love, even if they cost a little more, because we have saved money by not buying as much. I had mentioned before even about closets. This is even true with our clothing. When we don't have as many things, we can invest in nicer things. I really enjoyed seeing this put into action at the Little Log Cabin. The final thing I learned at the Little Log Cabin was to let your senses guide you. This little log cabin, although it was tiny and had minimal furniture, it was still so welcoming and cozy. As I looked around, I could see that all of my senses were being engaged in this cabin. When we walked in, there was a beautiful rug on the floor, and so there was a softness. When we went upstairs to where the bedroom was, there was a little chocolate bar from a local place on the bedstand, and there was a little bottle of lavender spray to spray on your sheets to make it smell good. Everywhere I looked, there was beauty. Even the things like a broom, instead of just being a cheap old broom with a plastic handle, it would be a wooden handle and a small broom. In the kitchen, the dish towels were beautiful. The silverware was beautiful. The plates were beautiful. There wasn't much of anything, but every single piece that was there was beautiful. I know we can do this in our own homes as well. I encourage you to think of your home like you were coming into a vacation home. What would make you feel welcome? Perhaps light a candle. Things like your dish towels and dishcloths. Try to find beautiful prints. Try to keep those fresh. It's a very inexpensive way to update your kitchen and make it look fresh that doesn't cost a lot of money. Add things like music playing in the background. When we go into our living room, add beautiful throws that are soft and luxurious. Add pillows. Try to think of ways that make that room feel cozier and yet beautiful to the eyes. Whenever we go into our bedrooms, think of what would make it feel luxurious. We can use beautiful blankets on our beds. Add things like a spray that we spray over our pillows at night before we crawl into bed. Add candles. Bring real flowers into your home. This brings such a welcoming touch to every home, and you can do it inexpensively just by going outside often or going to your local grocery store and just getting a small bouquet. I will always be thankful for this time that we were able to spend in a little log cabin. And I hope that the lessons I learned there will make my own home more welcoming and cozy for those who enter. I hope you can think of some things to add to your own homes as well. And I hope you will have a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video.